and welcome to 21st Century Talk Show. I'm Angelique. Here at 21st Century, we look to bring the Bible to life in these modern times in which we live. This talk show started with a weekly blog post, 21st Century Godly Living. It comes out every Friday morning. We'll try to leave a link below so you can check it out. Our belief is, whether you're a Christian or not, the Bible is our blueprint for how we all can live our best lives. So please share this link because you don't know who could benefit from the discussions that we share. Now, the topic for today is 21st century, or at least race relations in America for this 21st century. And since biblical times, there has always been strife among God's children, be it money, status, and most definitely race, someone's race, ethnicity. So for this year, we knew, and doing our slate for this year for different topics, we had to include the discussion of race in this country being the United States, where we are now recording. And over the past few weeks and actually years, various events that has occurred, we thought it a good idea to bring various people together from different races and ethnicities to talk about race in this country and how it affects them in their walk of life, or even if it does affect them in their everyday walk in life. So in this segment, we will be discussing white, Black, and Hispanic races. Now, I do understand that there are people who are from a combination of those races and various ethnicities, and we may not can cover everyone. However, our intent is to try to encompass most people. So due to time constraints and not having everyone who can represent various races on our panel, please forgive us, but we were trying to do our best, and that was our intent. Also, while we're discussing race, we will use the term of white, Black, and Hispanic. And I will share a reason why. I have come across individuals who have told me that I am not African American because of where they were born and their walk in life and their ethnicity. So even though to you and I, they may look African American or Black. So I just want to use the general term of white, Black, and Hispanic. And again, our intent is to encompass all people. Okay, so like to now introduce our panel guests. Our first guest is Miss Cheryl Page, who we affectionately call Shelly. Shelly, welcome.
Thank you so very much
for joining us. Our next guest is Miss Sarah Booher. Sarah, are you on? I know we were having some issues, but is she there now? She is not. Okay, but she will be joining us very shortly. And our next guest is Mr. Derek Stevens. Derek, say hello to those.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. It's an honor.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Jake Ancrum. Jake, please say hello.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be here.
All right. Thanks so much. And again, we will be getting Sarah Booher. She is also on our panel, so we will be seeing her shortly. And last but not least, I have Mr. Eric Herrera, who's also my marketing manager. Eric, say hello.
Hi, everyone. Here we are once again.
Thank you. Welcome, welcome. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us. We do have several questions and it's that we want to tackle. But before we get started, I want everyone to get an idea of who you are. So we will begin this little bit with Shelly. State your occupation, which part of the country you are from, and perhaps live now, and what is your favorite thing to do?
Okay, so I was born in Louisiana but raised in Houston, so Houston is my home. I currently live outside of Orlando, Florida, and my favorite thing to do is craft. I love quilting and knitting and crocheting and painting. I'm not very good at any of those, but they bring me peace.
That's all it takes, right? Next, we'll have Derek. Derek, sir, you can tell us your occupation, which part of the country where you're from or where you're born, and something fun that you would like to do, that you like to do.
I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I currently serve as research faculty for Florida State University Center for Behavioral Health Integration. I'm also entrepreneur and founder of Underdog Dream, a nonprofit that exists to provide foster youth with opportunities, purpose, and hopefully the intent to live or the opportunity to live with intention. I am from or currently in Orlando, Florida, and something that I love to do right now, it is carpentry. I took carpentry in middle school, and I'm trying to do some things around the house and falling in love with it again. So thanks.
Awesome. So what part of the country do you hail from? Where did you mostly grow up?
I'm from Atlanta, Georgia.
All right. Next, we have Eric Herrera. Eric, where were you born or where are you from? And what is your occupation? And what is one of your favorite things to do?
Yeah. So I was born in Virginia, Fairfax, Virginia. Raised in many places, put it that way. But in my occupation today, I own a marketing company, and I focus in three industries today. Pretty much nonprofit, personal branding, and the construction slash real estate area. But yeah, what I like to do, soccer. I play a lot of soccer, as long as my knees allow me to. But I play soccer, yeah.
Awesome. Next, we will have Jake. And I think Sarah's there too. So Sarah, you'll be next. We see you loud and clear. Okay, Jake, what is your occupation? What part of the country were you born or raised, and where are you from? And what is your one favorite thing to do?
I'm an attorney here in Knoxville, Tennessee. I was born and raised here, and I enjoy fishing. I'm a fisherman.
All right. My grandpa was an avid fisherman. He used to get us up way early in the morning to go fishing.
Gotta get up there early.
Thank you so much. Sarah, where are you from? What's your occupation? Where are you from? And what's one of your favorite things you like to do?
Hey, thank you so much for having me today. I am Sarah. I'm originally from Vicksburg, Mississippi. Grew up there for half of my childhood and then went to Southern Indiana. And I am now in Knoxville, Tennessee, and have been as of 16 years today.
All right. And what is it you do?
I'm an attorney, and I love to read and go to trivia. I love to play trivia, and I read almost incessantly.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to go ahead and begin because we have a lot of questions. And for our questions, I've already told our panel that a lot of them are going to be answering them individually because it all involves race. We want to see what they say. And as you can see from our panel, just to point it out, but everyone can see, we have Shelly, who is a Black female. Derek is a Black male. Eric is a Hispanic male, and Jake is a white male, and Sarah is a white female. So, and of course, I'm a Black female, so I'll put a little 2 cents in, but for the most part, I want to have answers from my panel. So, first question, do you feel there is racial disparity problem in America from your personal point of view? If yes or no, explain why you feel this way, and you can give a brief example. Again, do you feel there is racial disparity problem in America from your personal point of view? We'll say Shelly.
Okay. I do believe that there are racial disparities, and this is from my personal point of view. So being a licensed attorney, I graduated from law school. I was the only African-American female in my graduating class from law school out of almost 400 students. And so I knew going into this field that there would not be a lot of African-American females. I didn't have any African-American female professors. And in the entire law school, there was only one African-American male. So when I became a criminal prosecutor, there were not many African-American females. As a law professor, I was the first African-American female tenure track at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, Texas. And this school had been around for a couple hundred years. As well as so Jake and Sarah are my former students who I love to death and just think the world of. But at LMU in Knoxville, Tennessee, for many, many years, I was the only African-American professor on the faculty. And so when I think about, not only are there not a lot of African-Americans who are attorneys, but there are even less who are African-American females who are attorneys, even less who are African-American female law professors. And then I think about disparities. I think of pay disparities. about disparities in healthcare, how African American females are more likely to die from diseases and illnesses that other females of other races are not dying from. So there are definitely inequities in every single aspect of our society, and they touch us every single day. Just something as simple as me going to the store to buy a gun, I get pushback that other people don't get going to buy a gun. And I don't have a criminal history. So, but yes, I don't, yeah, I would definitely say there are disparities.
All right. Thank you so much for your answer. Sarah, what about you? Do you feel there's a racial disparity problem in America from your own personal point of view?
I absolutely do. I think probably it shows, like Shelley, it shows most prevalently in my profession. And I think honestly, and this is to be perfectly blunt, I do personal injury work. I have noticed, and of course I can't prove this, and it's a very difficult subject to broach with adjusters, but when I have clients who have non-white names, be they Hispanic, Black, whatever, I noticed that there is a definite difference in the type of offers that I get on cases. So, and I have also been told and told other attorneys, and it's not even that I believe it, but I know if I were to go in front of a jury, you have to take race into consideration. And not only race, but current status in the United States. So I see a disparity all the time. I try not to play into it. But sometimes it's something that you have to be cognizant of if you're thinking about going in front of a jury.
Eric, what are your thoughts?
So I would have to say that yes, there is. And to be honest, you can always notice it if you come out of your bubble kind of thing. If you're always around people that look like you, it's harder. And sometimes there's things there that you don't know that they're like racist based. For example, in the Hispanic community, a lot of people speak Spanish. So if someone's being racist in English, it could be a smart comment or something. A lot of them don't get it. But if they would understand it, they would see that. Also, there's things like, for example, in the Hispanic community, there's a lot of people that are still illegal. And let's say, for example, myself, the way a Hispanic will be treated that's illegal, obviously, it will be people will be scared, if anything. So just I also a good example. I was one time working on the field on a project, and a gentleman um, that pretty much spoke English spoke to the Hispanic community. He spoke Hispanic, but he spoke to them in English. They automatically got scared when they heard them speak in English, and they changed their approach because there's a scar there that do not mess with certain people, and so. But on the other side, the person who spoke in English knew that, and he told me, "Look what I'm going to do," and he spoke to them in English because he knew that was going to throw them off. Um, and so in general, there's different approaches, but there's ignorance. I would say the racial part, how someone looks is just there in so many ways, from the point of ignorance, from a point of view of consciously doing it.
Okay, I want to ask you before I get to you, the other two gentlemen. Eric, I want to ask you this because it just came to me. Like I said, we are going to discuss some things, unpack some questions. For you being, I know you're Venezuelan, but you just said you were born here in the United States. Do people automatically sometimes, or have you had an incident where they feel that you're undocumented and you don't belong in this country because of the way you look? Has that happened to you?
Yeah. So I had to learn this. First of all, my parents were illegal immigrants. So in a way, even though I was in the U.S., I learned to speak Spanish before I speak English. I remember probably when I went to pre-K when I learned how to speak English or whatever. And so the assumption is often that I have an accent. It's not as strong as a lot of people, but just because there's a little bit of an accent, they would ask, "Where are you from?" And I would say, I always tell people where I'm from according to what the audience is. So, technically, how am I going to educate this person? So when they ask this question, "Where are you from?" and I feel that I can hear in the tone of voice a little bit of sarcasm, or I don't know what it is, I say, oh, I'm from Fairfax, Virginia. I say that right away. But then they ask me again, but no, where are you really from? And then I say, I am from Fairfax, Virginia. And I hold them there because that's what they need to know. Now, then again, let's say I'm with a Hispanic kind of crew and they ask me, where are you from? I say, I'm Venezuelan, but I was born in Fairfax. I say, I kind of give a different answer. You just know who's asking the question. Um, but yeah, I did have one time when a gentleman told me, "No, you're not from around here." Even though I told him I was from Fairfax, Virginia, you're not from around here. I'm like, okay, just let it be like that.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Jacob or Jake. The question was, do you feel there is a racial disparity problem in America? And your personal point of view.
Unfortunately, there is. I think it's at large. I think that in the past 4 years, we've really seen it come to light, even more so. People of color experience it more often on a daily basis. But I think that white people, uh, objective, rational-minded white people, have seen it come to light. People seem to be empowered or feel empowered to speak out more, and it's unfortunate. I see it in my field as an attorney. I see it. Um, I see it everywhere I look. We look at housing. We look at healthcare. There's certainly disparities. We look at racial profiling. We look at our criminal system, our judicial system. It's there.
Thank you. And Derek, do you feel
Uh,
there's a racial disparity problem here in America?
Absolutely. From a personal point of view, just being a young African American male growing up in America, it's something I've experienced from the get-go. I think growing up in foster care and advocating for foster youth, I get to see pockets where it's more prevalent. It's more in your face. So the two examples I go to are prison system, healthcare, both of which I work in. So I have 4 kids of my own, and my nephew lives with me, so 5. 2 daughters, 3 boys. So statistics say one of my boys will go to prison at some point. And that's very real, very scary. It's something I have to work against every day versus 1 in 6 Latinos and 1 in 17 white. And so think about it. I mean, that was a statistic that just blew my mind. You would have to have 17 kids to be as fearful as I am on a daily basis about my 3. I have one that's 19 in college and 7 and 13. And so every day he's off from home, I'm scared. In healthcare, I own and operate an assisted living facility, and we cater to individuals who have a history of substance use disorder, majority of the opioid crisis. And so we've had a facility open for about a year, January 31st. And I had to ask the question to the system we work with. I've not received one referral for an African American individual in an entire year. I know we have opioid, we've been hit as well. And so sometimes things are baked in systematically that we don't necessarily realize, or it's not someone sitting behind a computer maliciously working these things out, but they've been baked into the system. So yes, absolutely.
And Angelique, actually, that reminds me, yesterday, my parents and I were talking, and it was announced, there was some sort of statistic in USA Today yesterday that Memphis is more than 3/4 Black, and white people have received almost all of the vaccinations thus far in Memphis, Tennessee. And Memphis makes up, white people in Memphis are probably less than 25%. And I mean, I think that's a stark. And I think even as Derek was saying, the difference in how we treat substance abuse and substance use disorder amongst the races is extraordinarily different. I mean, when there was a crack crisis in the 80s, it was a very different reaction to how we're dealing with the white opioid crisis today.
It's even brought out more in the media because of the white individuals, as opposed to it's always been maybe for years and years and years with the Black community. So thank you for that. Next question. Do you feel there is still segregation here in America in this 21st century? And you don't have to, because we kind of talked about the racial disparity, it may be the same thing, but actual segregation. So let's go to Eric. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. It may not be as obvious as in the past, but if you look deep into it, there is. Um, I'm not gonna say too much because I'm still kind of up, but there is an area that is being developed. One of the most common things is that when you develop an area, they want to increase or whatever the value, whatever the mentality is, and so they end up pushing whoever's there and in that area, gerrymandering, is what they call it. But it's happening right now in Orlando. If you look in downtown Orlando, the Paramore area, you look at that area, that's what they're doing there. They're developing a lot of good stuff, but at the same time, a group of people are being affected there, and so what happens is that the prices go up um in that area, so the people that sell end up getting a good price for the home, but they have to live somewhere very far away from the city. And something that I learned in my nonprofit environment when I was working with specific church, um people that have lower income live closer to the city, and the reason why is because they need to get access to jobs, to the public transportation, all those different things. The more money you have and you're comfortable, for example, when it comes to housing, you live on the outskirts of the city because you have a car and all these different things. But if you then again in downtown or in the cities, they try to put nice buildings, if anything apartments, but a home specifically, they try to push them away and build these nice retail, whatever the case may be. So in that case, by default, the way things are happening, there's a segregation economically speaking, um and that and it affects specific groups of people that do not have enough you know I guess a net worth or net equity, whatever you want to call it.
Thank you. Derek, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about, I'm here in Orlando, so when you name Paramore, I think about a community, and I'm going to name the community Avalon Park, that I used to live in. And me and my wife remember, just some things that happened while we lived there. Moving in, just filling out the application. We actually had a property management company just take back I'm going to give you the deposit back, and took back the application to not let us move in. We found that we made our way in, right? I remember having the police call twice, once because I had my Jeep outside the home and it was suspicious. Once because I was sitting near the lake studying for my MBA and I was suspicious. And I remember one time having a conversation with the homeowners association as they rode through about a letter I received. And I remember being told, well, if you don't like it, move out of here. Right. So it may not be on the surface per se, but you definitely know there are elements of segregation everywhere. I think for me, the most pressing is I believe that there's this kind of mental, cognitive segregation that exists among us, right? Just integrating into different communities. I live in a different community now, and I find myself having to work really hard to integrate with my neighbors. It's a majority white community. And I even ask myself, it's a mental set, very uncomfortable for where I come from. And so I believe there's a block cognitively that we're all working through as well.
Thank you. Jacob, do you believe there's segregation here? 21st century.
The laws on the books, there is no segregation. However, what we see is an economic system that we have with capitalism. We have one of the unfortunate byproducts is it requires a poverty class. And then I think what you see from that is you start to see some prejudice, some racism within the people in our government or the wealthy, and you start to see people of color falling into that class of poverty. Now, obviously, there are white people of all colors.
Thank
But there's no reason that sorry.
No, I was going to ask if everyone can mute, and then you can continue because I'm hearing some kind of feedback, but maybe that'll help. So keep continuing. It's good what you're saying, Jake. Keep going.
Yeah, like I said, I think that people of color certainly feel it. All people feel the poverty that I'm speaking of, but it seems to be more prominent with people of color.
Thank you so much. Sarah, your thoughts?
I think there's absolutely segregation today, and I think we only have to go as far as our churches to see that. And I think that Derek brought up a very interesting point that I think a lot of it is just a mental based thing. I think a lot of times we're not even intending to do it, but I think that integrating is something that we actively have to mentally work at every day in our lives. And I do the same thing. I'm not perfect. I try all the time to be more racially cognizant, but I still get excited every time I see female attorneys of color. Anytime I see somebody of a different race, a person of color succeeding in whatever they're doing in life, I get really excited. But I also know that for all of my relationships that I have with people of color, those are relationships that I have to work at very maintaining and keeping up and having new relationships of the same. Not because those relationships are necessarily any harder than my relationships with white people, but just that we are, I think, inherently such a segregated society that we're not doing the same jobs. We're not hanging out at the same places socially. So it's something that we have to work very hard at overcoming. And I think church is one of the best places that we could start and could certainly be a solution to our current problems, but it's exceedingly difficult and it's exhausting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Do you mind if I piggyback off of Sarah?
Yes. Yes. Go ahead.
I first just want to say thank you for being vulnerable, because I think that's one of the things that we as a society have a hard time. And I think about education, I think about youth, and they very much excite me because I think they are in a different realm. However, I do think for the adults in the room that we have an obligation, and we may be missing this, is to, when we desegregated, I don't know how much education went into the mental fortitude that it's going to take to address our biases, our inherent biases, training around how do we bubble them up? How do we have conversations where we can disagree and still be okay? I don't know if we teach that enough to just people. I know for myself, going through Robert Wood Johnson Clinical Scholar Program, which is all about race, equity, social determinants of health, it really opens your eyes to how education around compassion and empathy and understanding really, really pushes a mindset that can truly desegregate and integrate, with everybody. So I just wanted to add that, sir, because I thought that was a great point, and just for us to be more vulnerable and speaking our truth.
Well, and I think it's also really frustrating, white person, that it's not, whether it's in the movies or in social work, because I'm a big mental health advocate, it really frustrates me that white people feel like Black people and people of color are the people that need to be teaching us this. Like, this is something that we as white people should be teaching each other. And we don't need to have people winning Oscars all the time for roles that are teaching white people how to be decent people. Like, people of color should be able to win an Oscar for, doing a great performance, regardless of what that performance was. So that's something that really is frustrating to me as well, is we shouldn't be in the law or in mental health or whatever being taught by another community how to be vulnerable and how to be open. I think it's Jake's and my job to call our people out and say, what are you doing? This, you have to be compassionate. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Did I go off the rails there?
No, that's fine. That's fine. We're going to have a lot of.
And Sarah, I'm quick to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we both are. We're pretty sassy.
Yeah, Sarah, to what you're saying, right now we're mentioning, the Caucasian community with the Blacks and stuff, but it also happens with all interjecting with all different cultures, Black, Hispanics, Asians, you bring them all in the mix, and we all are in a way ignorant about different cultures in general. And so, for example, in the Hispanic community, I was shocked to know this, but if you look at history, my ignorance again, 90% of the slaves end up in South America, 90%. And so the way, when you look at the story and the history of how it was dealt down there, it was killed. It was like they made sure there was no trace of giving the Black community a representation down there. So, and you have two types of Hispanics out here in America. You have into colorism. You go into colorism, right? Colorism is a concept that the darker you are, the less value you have, and the whiter you are or lighter you are, the more value you have, right? So that applies to South America. If you go to Mexico, for example, the Spaniards actually had a whole like diagram of classification on that. Like they did such a great job at classifying it and making sure there was a system, a clear system there. So now you have Hispanics that come here to the United States and they're involved in the conversation that's happening in the media. Most of them come with the mentality that it's ingrained. A lot of them are, I would say, racist by ignorance because it was in the system already. It was established in the system. So then when we come in America, this conversation that we have, it's a beacon of light when we bring it into the stage, because everybody gets to see what the true thing is. If when we put the light on let's say, the slavery part, we can get to understand as Hispanics ourselves what's happening in our own countries. But once in the United States, that's just one part. When you go down to South America, it's a whole new ballgame. It's a different ballgame down there. So, but yeah, we have to do that. Like even our Hispanic community, I have to be active at educating my people on how to do this. I'm married to a Black lady. She's from Kenya. She's from Africa. And even in my own family, there was a lot of things that they did not understand, that if somebody were to hear them, they're like, oh, they're so racist, And in reality, it was a lot of ignorance that I had to educate them on. Now, they're great people and everything. They just needed someone like me that looked like them to tell them and speak their lingo for them to see what the other person from another culture will not be able to explain to them. So I get what I'm just picking back on what you're saying and giving my background on that side.
No, I appreciate it.
And that's
I wanted to have Shelley to have an opportunity. What do you still feel there's segregation here in America and this 21st century? I know you kind of mentioned it. Just briefly, if you can mention it, because we want to move on to some other questions. So, Shelley.
Yes. The landmark case that came out that looked at segregation is Brown versus Board of Education, 1954 case, and in that case, there's one part where a justice said the benefits of diversity. And one of the benefits that's listed is this will help Black people. And every time I teach this in my education law class, I make sure to stress diversity helps all of us. Diversity benefits everyone. We have more in common than that's different. We definitely have segregation, and you can look at it in our neighborhoods. You can look at it in our schools, hospitals. I think Sarah said it exactly right. Our churches. So I spent 9 years in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm Seventh-day Adventist, and the church that we spent most of our time at is Grace Seventh-day Adventist Church. We were there at that church for 5 of the 9 years that I lived there. Of the 5 years, one Sabbath, we had an African-American female speak for Women's Day. Every single other Sabbath, 52 Sabbaths a year times 5 was a white male. I think some of the times were white females, but it was mainly white males. And it wasn't until I came to Orlando, where I'm seeing all kinds of different diversity, that I felt so bad that the church that I'd come from was so segregated. Now, don't get me wrong, they treated James and I and our kids really nice, but we never rose, and James is an elder in our church. We never rose to the level of where we were valued enough that we would be able to speak from the pulpit. And I think That's just one aspect of segregation. And but I do agree with Sarah. It is up to all of us to make sure that we reach out to the people in our communities. It is my job to make sure that people don't look at Jake and say, oh, he must be racist. That's my job to do that. So.
Thank you so much. And I want to add my own little 2 cents, because all of you and your stories, and also I think mainly what Derek had mentioned about our children. I saw a video that was trending, and maybe some of you have seen it, about this. It was a white family, and you just saw the little boy, the white little boy, and the father was in the background. You didn't really see him, but you heard him. And he pointed to a boy picture on a television. And it was a little boy on a computer screen or something. And it was a black boy, and he was in the middle of this grassy field, and the grass was really high. So he asked his son, what do you see? And the son was probably 8 or something like that, 7 or 8, little one. And he said, a boy. He said, what else do you see? There's a lot of grass. And, he said, so what else do you see? He said, what do you see about this little boy? He didn't even mention race. He kept saying, he said, it looks like he's having fun. And he said, what else do you see? He said, I want to have fun with them. So the whole point, what I'm sharing is, from that little boy, he never said, I see a black boy, or he's out of picture, out of place, nothing like that. This little boy, and the father, when he taped it, basically let us all know that his child was not taught race. He was taught, I see a boy, and I see he's having fun. He's in the, grass, and so I just, just to say that, I think that's for all of us, is to teach our young ones, however old they are, that you see a person. You don't just see a white person or a black person. Yeah, you do, but you also see God's children. You see a human being, part of the human race. That's it, And don't. And we'll talk about that. We'll unpack it. There's some more questions. Okay. I think we'll unpack this further. But go ahead. One more point, and we'll move on.
I just wanted to say to that point, I do believe that it is imperative that we see the differences. The deal is, we don't discriminate based on those differences. That's
right. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that. You don't pigeonhole people because of what you see. So we'll talk about that. Now, I'm going to combine the next 2 questions, and I want to move a little bit. So I do want your answers, but we do want to cover everything because time is wasting, or not wasting, but moving. What are your feelings and understanding about the current racial tensions and unrest in light of all the known incidents recently, especially with police? And also the next question is, what are your feelings about the marches and protests? So what are your feelings and understandings about the current racial tensions involving police, and just in general, and also your feelings on the marches and protests? So we're going to go around, and again, if we can concise our answers so we can move, because there's so many other things I want to talk about. Derek, quickly, if you can answer.
I think, for me, the concise answer is we have cognitive dissonance that has run amok from lack of education, and kind of what we went back to actually being able to point out and understand people's differences. And I think that lack of education creates this mindset that, people aren't deserving of equal treatment. They've done something, because we don't understand the history, especially if we talk about trauma and what that does to the brain. As far as the marches and protests, I think we always have to have a society that is willing to get out, march, protest, make some noise. The one thing I found that I would add is, I think there has to be a greater intention on economic stability within our communities, and building that power and resource as well, because that kind of moves that marching and protesting to, I believe, additional actionable steps beyond what we would get from marching and protesting.
But my question is, what are your feelings about it? Do you agree with the marches and protests, or do you not agree?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. When accountability is something that is hard to come by, with very blatant things happening, we have to get out there and make noise. I absolutely agree with the marching and the protesting.
Okay. And Sarah, what are your thoughts? What are your feelings about the current racial tensions involving police and just all the incidents and the marches and protests?
I absolutely 100% support marching and protests, even if it's for a side that I don't agree with. I think protesting is probably American as apple pie. It's certainly rooted in our American culture from the beginning. So it's something that I definitely agree with and support. I do think storming the Capitol is not the answer, and I don't consider that to be acceptable protesting. But I think it's something that we need to do. I think it's unifying in a sense, and I think it presents a good way for us to have some face to face interaction with people that don't necessarily agree with us. Um, I have a lot of issues surrounding uh, our feelings with the police right now. I was certainly raised in a house that's probably a non-traditional Southern white household, and so I was always taught to distrust authority, regardless of who that authority was. Have a healthy disrespect, of course, but still challenge kind of expectations. And I think that's a big issue for me. Is I have a distrust anyway of police because that's, kind of a military authority, but also, we're seeing the same thing happening over and over and over again. And I don't think that you have to be, a male black man or, a person of color, a mother of color to understand that that's a serious issue. We all should theoretically know people and love people who are more vulnerable populations to the police. So I'm sorry, I know you said to quickly talk about that, but that's something that's got to be reformed. And I don't know how to reform that issue within the police when there is a very established mentality and way of approaching things and conservative mentality that leads to this kind of thing.
You know what, Sarah? I want to ask, because this is a discussion. You mentioned something that I'll have to be totally honest and vulnerable, that I kind of was shocked when you said you are apprehensive of police. I've always thought that as a black person, black males, yeah, you're definitely apprehensive, but I've always never thought of a white person saying that they were vulnerable or scared.
Oh, no, I want to clarify that. I don't feel scared personally. If I got pulled over by the police, I would be fearful just because that's a fearful situation, but not as a white female. I'm saying I'm apprehensive and I'm scared about how other people are treated by the police when they.
But I'm glad, you clarified, because I was curious. I'm like,
no, sorry. I don't want that to be an understanding at all, because that's not true. I am not concerned beyond the normal fear of being pulled over, but it does make me fearful that we're not all treated the same when we are pulled over, or that I can go pretty much wherever I want and do what I want as long as I act like I know what I'm doing and it's not a problem. But when a black man is somewhere that he's supposed to be in his own neighborhood and is suspicious, that's a real problem.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how we retrain the brain for that.
Thank you. Eric, quickly, your feelings and understanding about current racial tensions and unrest involving police and other incidents, and what do you feel about the marches and protests?
So, I guess I have to use like what I've experienced as well in the mix of it. So when I look at a police officer from my point of view, I do get scared. And I'm speaking from a Hispanic point of view first. And I used to battle with the decision of like, oh, because of the buildup for my parents, they're always scared because they were illegal. So I thought that. So I had to overcome that, and I had to think, hold on, I'm a citizen of this country. I'm going to be treated like anybody else. When I changed that in my mind, I was able to kind of deal with cops a little bit different. Now, I did have a particular job before that I had to deal a lot with them because I was always in the communities with a whole bunch of kids doing evangelistic work. And people will call the police often because they're like, oh, there's solicitors in the neighborhood kind of thing. So what always happened, and actually I've dealt with this in Tennessee, Nashville, Tennessee, White House in Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee. I dealt with it in Atlanta. I've dealt with it here in Florida, all over Florida. So what I've noticed is that cops are human. They're people, and they're gonna treat you not always according to the law. They're gonna treat you according to what they know and their racist biases. Some cops were ignorant about the laws, and they were enforced them like it was true. Like, so that was one thing. So that's one aspect of it, okay? But that's how they treat me. Then I look at how they treated my wife probably like 2 or 3 months ago. Two cops stopped her. She's a black lady. Both of them stopped, draw their guns, and pretty much were ready to do whatever they needed to do. It was not a big deal, to be honest. It was not a big deal. And I told my wife, in my ignorance, by the way, I told her, hey, hon, why didn't you tell them? Why didn't you clarify with them? She told me the simple answer is like, Eric, I did not want to get killed. I did not want to get killed. So that's a big contrast. You know, I need to see that through the eyes of someone else, that I was not experiencing that. So when you start hearing asking your friends, I start asking my friends, my black friends, hey, what's going on? I had one time a guy just, you know, like there's so many stories about police specifically, and they're at that point you are trained to, by your own experience, to not like the police because of how they treat you. You know, it's in an illegal form. There's a mistreatment of, like in this case, I'm talking about the black community and even the Hispanic community. From my point of view, I just explained one part. So when I see what's happening in the country, there's so many things that can go wrong. One, by the ignorance of the cop, one other by their perception. And another thing is like the reaction of people. There's people with different personalities, and they're just fed up with it, you know? So when I see the protests, I say, yes, you should protest. Yes, you should bring attention to the situation. I also must say, I am not okay with the Capitol and the rioting in the Capitol, neither the rioting on the other side either, you know? And I do have to say that on the, however you want to look at it, writing is just not good. Even from, you know, this weekend is MLK weekend, right? He pretty much, when he approached a Gandhi approach, a peaceful approach, a protest approach, but he approached every situation. It was not just the racial part. It was also the workers, the trash men that were not getting paid enough, and they needed to bring that up. You know, it was all the different things. So the protesting, I'm okay with, and I'm for it. We just have to make sure that on the media stage, that's the other thing. Sometimes the way the media puts it, or heighten it up as well, is they like to put this one versus the other one. It's like a fight. You know, we're going to see a big fight of boxing. On one side we have this contender, on the other side we have this contender. Let's bring him on and make him fight. That approach is not good either. So I guess what we have to do is have people like each one of us have these conversations so people educate themselves and understand the other side. And then when we see a protest, if you want, join them as well. Even if they don't look like you, just go ahead and join the protest and be part of bringing attention to the whole conversation. But not only that, beyond that, how Derek was saying, we have to take other actions too. We need to make sure, like, you know, we talk about capitalism, according to Jacob. Capitalism is set up in a way that there's a poverty group out there. We need to bring people out of poverty. We need to bring that conversation. We need to educate, give them access to credit. We have to help them get to real estate. We have to connect them with people that understand these different things to do that. And how do we do that? Well, we have to push laws that benefit everybody. You know, we have to make the playing equal. So when I think about the whole police situation again, and just to summarize it all, I think there's ignorance from the police part, and there's racism also in the police part in there, embedded in them, either by ignorance or by whatever the case may be. And there's also, from the point of view of protesters, we need we need to bring it up. We need to bring it to light. So these things are solved. If you don't know it, if I don't know it, I cannot do anything about it. So that needs to be taken in consideration. It's a very hard thing to do, but you know, one day at a time, one family member at a time, one friend at a time. I think that's the best way.
Thank you so much. And quickly, I'll go to Jake. Your feelings on understanding, or what are your feelings understanding the current racial tensions and unrest, and what are your feelings about the marches and protests?
Well, Angelique, this is probably my most passionate section of our agenda today, so I'll try to make it brief. As a bald white man, it's bad genes. Okay, it's not a haircut. I feel it's important for me to say this, to preface this, that as a white man, I don't think it's fair or my place to judge the reactions and responses of others, given the police brutality and racial inequalities that we see today. It's not my place to critique them on how they respond to it. I do not condone the violence, the rioting. I condemn violence by anyone. I'm a combat veteran. And so in my experience, subjectively, there's rules of engagement. There are Geneva Conventions. that dictate how we engage enemy troops. On my tour in Baghdad, I was a convoy commander. We ran security convoys. We couldn't just engage a perceived threat for our security. We didn't get to make that decision that my life is more important than theirs, and I have a family to go home to today. And so that's getting into law enforcement. I feel like that there are statistically is more whites than people than blacks that are killed by law enforcement. And so, as Sarah was saying earlier, or you clarified with Sarah, I actually do fear the police, Angelique. The amount of authority, the power that they have, and that it's ruled by the subjectivity of that officer. If he deems me to be a threat, or if he wants to take me in, all he has to allege is the smell of alcohol, smell of marijuana, smell of anything. That's a loophole around all of our protections. It's my word against theirs. So I've always been very fearful of police officers. Not that I'm anti-police. I want to clarify that as well. But I think the problem with, not to be when I say there's more whites than blacks, I think when you look at the individual cases, the difference is that a lot of the people of color that are killed by police were racially profiled, were innocently killed. I think that's a big discrepancy between the whites and black victims of police brutality. But it happens to us all. And so I think the sooner that people of my color realize this can happen to them, or when it finally, unfortunately, happens to them, then it becomes an issue for them. If they just view it as a problem for the black community, for the Hispanic community, it's not a problem to them directly, then it falls on deaf ears. And then, going back to there are police immunities that empower this culture within law enforcement. And one of my biggest passions is we need legislation. We need legislation to erode these court-made immunities that empower police officers to shoot first and ask questions later. Police officers are put in a very precarious position. I understand it as a military man. I understand it. But to me, that blue line that a lot of people like to talk about, or they thank me for my service, it's because I put my life on the line for others. And for me to truly respect and appreciate law enforcement, it's because they're putting their life on the line for others. There's a chance they may not come home tonight. But within that community, within that culture of law enforcement, they feel entitled and they are now empowered because of these court-made immunities to shoot first and ask questions later. And a lot of these folks that aren't concerned about police brutality are big on their Second Amendment. We also have amendments to due process. And so whether I've done something illegal or not, when someone that is charged to protect and to serve kills someone, they violated my rights to due process. So, this just my take on it. And going back to the protest, I've been part of a few here in Knoxville, Tennessee. And I'm wearing the shirt today. I don't know if you guys can read it on there or not. I am a University of Tennessee alumnus. There was a student-led march this year. They put these T-shirts out. Our athletic program at the University of Tennessee is horrendous right now. Our football program is terrible. But one thing I'm so proud of is the way we have handled this, the racial inequalities that have been in the press lately. We were one of the first programs in the country for our athletic director, our coaches, to step up and make statements and go on record supporting our student athletes, and that they're not just for entertainment purposes. They are people. If you support our players on Saturday, support them the rest of the week. That's my take on it. Hope that wasn't too long. I tried to cram that all in, but I think the root of the problem are the police.
We want those answers. Thank you so much. Ms. Shelley, what are your thoughts in regards to the current racial tensions and unrest and the marches and protests? I
just want to say, you guys see why I love Jake and Sarah. They are phenomenal people. Like, you know, sometimes you meet people who say what they think you want them to say. That's not Sarah and Jake. And I thank God that God blessed me with both of them. I am completely in agreement with protests, peaceful protests. I am not ever in agreement with violence or destruction or vandalism, hurting people, never on either side. Issues I believe in should never manifest itself in me hurting someone or destroying property. Even disobeying curfews. If it's 6 o'clock, take your ass home and go by 6 o'clock. So
Kristen talk show.
Yes. Okay, so I am completely in agreement with protests, peaceful protests. As far as law enforcement, I do believe just recently with everything that's happened at the Capitol, it came out that some of the Capitol police were secretly involved in the protests that were going to happen with the storming of the Capitol, that there are police officers that were complicit in it. And every single African American in America said, we've been saying this for years. We've been saying this for years. And I want us as a society to get to the point where there's this term mansplaining. I have been in faculty meetings, said something clearly in English. I'm fluent in English. And I've had a white male professor multiple times explain to the whole group what I just said. I don't need a white person to be my microphone. So when I speak, I want my words to be taken seriously the first time. And so when African Americans have been saying for centuries that there is racism in law enforcement, when we look back to why law enforcement came to be in the first place, it was to trap slaves that had escaped from slavery. That is how patrol officers came into being. That is what the root of law enforcement is. So we have to first acknowledge that. And I do believe, like Sarah said, how do you help people have good hearts and morals and consciences? You can't. You cannot legislate morality. I personally believe it takes, it's going to take the Holy Spirit and Jesus changing our hearts from the inside out, helping us to see the good in other people, even when they don't look like us, even when they don't sound like us. So when a police officer, I have two boys, two brown boys. My oldest son is 28 in Kentucky. He just graduated with his master's in chemistry. He's a biochemist. He's starting a new job tomorrow. He just left our house 5 days ago. And I am terrified for my son who lives in Kentucky. Absolutely terrified that he is not with me. My youngest son has sickle cell, and he doesn't go very many places because of COVID and because he's sick a lot. But I feel so much better when they are in my house and they're not on the road. I cannot tell. So Nathaniel was here for 2 weeks for Christmas. At one point, being in the house just got to be too much, and he wanted to go down the road to go play basketball. I wanted him to take my gun with him when he left the house to just go down to the basketball court. That's how afraid I am for my boys. So when Nathaniel gets stopped, does he pull out his master's, his degree, and show the police officer, I don't pose a threat to you? The fears that Black people have of law enforcement is real. It's not made up. It's not. We're just crazy.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry.
Angelique, can I, and this, I feel like this is very important if you don't mind.
Yes.
You know, when we talk about solutions to getting people to be more empathetic, compassionate, there are actual solutions. You know, that's the most amazing thing about brain science and the things that we're learning. If you think about what trauma, and you can hear the trauma, right? Shelley, I mean, I feel it too, right? You can hear it. Trauma does something to our biology, down to the DNA. So the more stressed you are, the less capable from a scientific standpoint you are to be empathetic and compassionate. Think about the amount of stress all of us as Americans are under and have been under for quite some time. that lowers our ability to be compassionate and empathetic towards others. So part of the solution is, how do we de-stress America? Everything we see in the media, I tell a lot of my clients, stop watching the news. I used to be one of those. Daily dose of depression right when you wake up. If we walk around stressed continuously, we cannot feel for other people. We point fingers that they play into why we're so stressed. So being able to push forward nature and meditation and support systems, all those things lower people's stress in a sense where they now can be empathetic and compassionate to other people's plights. So I just feel like we got to know that there is science there, and there are ways to increase compassion and empathy among people.
Thank you so much.
Well, and not only that, but
Oh,
also
go ahead.
there's also ways when we're less stressed, it's easier for us to find solutions to other problems. So not just to be more compassionate, but to also see my only options here are not just to shoot or run, or something like that. Like, we can always, when we're not stressed and we're in our best self, we can think of greater varieties of options and better outcomes for each other.
Thank you. Moving on. I'm going to go through this list for each of you, and I do want you to give me just what comes to mind. The question is this: deep down in your initial feeling and thought, do you believe the portrayal of races in mainstream media to be accurate? And what are your thoughts and opinions that you hold? So yes, I want you to answer, what do you feel media is saying? And your second answer, what are your thoughts and beliefs in regards to these individuals or this group of people? So I'm going to go to each of you, and then I'm going to quickly, I just want one or two thoughts that come to your mind as far as media portrayal and your personal thoughts. So I'm going to go with Sarah. So, and we're going to first start with Mexican. What is the media portrayal and what is your personal thought? Quickly, just off the cuff.
I think the media portrays Mexicans as gangsters, as drug mules and that sort of thing. I went to actually a Catholic boarding school in Indiana when I was in high school, and 40% of our population were actual girls from Mexico who lived in Mexico and were international students. And last year, 2 years ago, I went to my high school reunion, and some of the girls from my class were going to be there. And I told people several times before I went, like, oh, I'm so excited because there's going to be a large population of our Mexican students there. And several times I was corrected from saying Mexican and being told to say Hispanic. And I was like, but why? They're Mexican. And so when I went to my high school reunion and I told people this, that was their same reaction, was, why would you call us Hispanic? You know that we're Mexican. And so I think the prejudice and the boxing in comes from both directions of, A, they're gangsters and they're drug mules and, they're no good, but also comes from, we don't even want to be bothered with learning their actual nationality. And if you know their actual nationality, you shouldn't say it. You should just call them Hispanic because that's the proper term. That's not the proper term. They are Hispanic, but they're also Mexican. And I know that. So I think it cuts both ways.
Eric, I know you probably want to pop in. When I get to you, I definitely want you to break that down as far as the Hispanic and also the other races. So Sarah, now keep going back to you on the Mexicans. So thank you for that. But your thoughts personally on Mexicans, that's what you were saying in media, but what are your thoughts?
Mine?
We have other races to go through. Yes. There's a lot of races here, and I'm going to go through each race for each person. That's why, real quick.
Well, I know a lot of Mexicans who are from Mexico, and so I don't think that is true. I guess that's the long and short of it.
But your thought is, for you like Mexicans, it sounds like. You have friends, your friends.
Yeah, that's what you mean. Yes, yes, sorry. I was not understanding.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on media for white people as well? And you are white, so kind of know what you think on white people, but what are your thoughts as far as media in regards to, is it accurate or not, or what is your portrayal?
I have a lot of issues with the media in general, regardless of what race we're talking about. I also get really frustrated at the way all of the issues right now are being portrayed. And so,
but right now we're talking about white people, the media and their portrayal of whites, because I'm going to go down the other.
I guess I don't have a problem with it. I mean,
Do you think-
no, I shouldn't say that. It's, you know what? Go to another person. Because
All right,
I mean,
we'll skip that one. What is your thoughts on Cubans or Puerto Ricans as far as the media and your personal thought, if you know any?
I think our portrayal is not good when we still can't even identify Puerto Ricans as American citizens. I think we're doing a great disservice to ourselves in our civics classes in high school and also in our media. So that's my primary issue there. The other issue is I think for 50 plus years, we've not been sympathetic to Cuban people and we've equated all of them with Castro. So I think we could have gone down a much better path with that and we didn't.
Thoughts on, I don't know if the media really talks so much here in the United States, but South America, people from South America, from the countries there.
Personally, I would say that's also inaccurate. I think there's a lot of, most of our discussion with South America revolves around either abject poverty and since this is a Christian program, a lot of missionary work. And so there's a lot of focus on that area and then also on the drugs. So I think that there's also still, you know, a lot of inaccurate portrayals of South Americans because we're looking at it either from an exceedingly biased Christian perspective or from an exceedingly biased law enforcement and international relations perspective.
For Blacks, the media, mainstream media, their portrayal of Blacks or Black people.
I think that's absolutely atrocious. I don't think that there's very much out there right now that's accurate. And so when there is media coverage, it tends to be focused on these police shootings. And I think if we had more accurate media reportings in all the other aspects of people of color's lives, then these might have a better impact when we are talking about them. But when all you're talking about with the Black community are police shootings, it's very frustrating on my side from a Christian perspective, but also it makes me see, and I'm not saying I agree with it, but I get an understanding of how ultra conservative, crazy white people get to their perceptions of Blacks being up to no good. And absolutely not saying that I agree with that, but they have to be able to see something over and over again besides their shooting deaths. There's more to their lives than that. Their lives have more value than that. And so we should be reflecting and reporting on that value before that life is taken too early. And so I also have to say that person I've appreciated is I watch This Is Us. I don't know how many people on the panel watch This Is Us, but I've really appreciated this season. They've talked about COVID, but also that they've addressed things like police shootings and how that makes Black people feel versus how white people feel. So I've appreciated that from a good representation perspective.
Okay, you broke up a little bit, but we pretty much got it. That's fine. And then just real quick, a couple more media presentation or accurate on Asians. What is your thoughts in regards to their portrayal of Asians?
You know, I read a book really recently about from a guy who had immigrated from Vietnam when he was 5. And he had gone to apply to colleges when he was younger. And he was denied admission at one school because they said he wasn't smart enough for an Asian, not amongst the entire group of people. So I think definitely our perception there is they're smart and hardworking. And if they're not brilliant and hardworking, then something's wrong. Yeah. And I don't, that's not a fair expectation to have of them.
No, no. Muslims and Jews. These are ethnic groups, but you know, I wanted to pop those in there.
Tennessee does not like Muslims. So, and I would imagine that is reflected across the country. I don't think we're special in that regard. But I do find it to be unfortunate. And we actually have a really great guy in Knoxville, Tennessee, named Yassine Toureau. And he has done wonderful, wonderful things locally and nationwide in terms of encouraging Knoxville to open its doors to people in our own hearts and our own communities, and then in the larger community as well. So he had actually reached out to the people after the riots to law enforcement, and somebody actually called him a friend of one of the officers that was killed and thanked him for his comments, but also just, you know, just to say he was a really great guy, and to thanks for honoring him. So again, that's somebody of the Muslim community telling us to be nice to Muslims, and that's still something that's frustrating to me. But I think we've got to hear it from everybody as far as Jews and Muslims go. We've got to be more open.
Thank you so much. For the interest of time, I'm going to only ask the same question to Derek and Eric. Eric, you're going to be last. And Shelly and Jake, if you want to pop in afterwards and say anything that, or have just a little quick snippet on this, that's fine as well. But Derek, your initial feeling on the portrayal of mainstream media to be accurate, and I'm going to go against the class that we just went through with Sarah, and also your opinions, your personal opinions on these group of people. So Mexican, in your thought.
So for my personal or kind of media?
Real quick, in regards to what media says, just one or two thoughts, and then your personal.
Okay. I think much of what the media does on a large scale is, one, it kind of whitewashes, for lack of a better term, kind of anything that is moved through that platform. The other thing I've grown to understand as an entrepreneur, I remember my eyes just being wide open in my MBA program, because one of the things I started to understand, and I think Jacob talked about this, at the end of the day, capitalism seems to run it all. So depending on what audience and what the need is, depends on the portrayal. So, and that's kind of a common answer for all these that we run through. As far as Mexicans, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. I moved to South Georgia as a 12-year-old, and then I came to Florida. I had never heard of a Mexican, a Haitian, a Puerto Rican, nothing, coming from Atlanta, Georgia. So when I got to Florida, obviously all these different groups I'm being introduced to. So I have to go from, my past experiences. Mexican Americans, for me, some of the most hardest working people on the planet. And I say that because in Florida, when we wanted to go get a little money, me and my best friend, his mom dated a Mexican man. They would say, come out to the orange grove if you want to make $7 or whatnot. And, me and him together couldn't get a bin full. And so the Mexican Americans that I've been exposed to, extremely hardworking people. And that's just from my personal perspective.
And the media, your portrayal, what do you think? The media portrays them fairly or no?
No, absolutely not. Illegals, I think one of the major things, they're taking your opportunity, your American dream away. And I don't think people realize that the American dream and where they start from is nothing we would, even given the opportunity, would want to deal with. So I think that portrayal is really hurting Mexican Americans or Mexicans in general.
Okay, your thoughts on the media portrayal of whites and your personal thoughts?
Yeah, again, I think everything is run through kind of a lens of superiority. At the end of the day, it's even for my kids, my 1-year-old daughter, I have to be intentional about what she watches. I have to find things on YouTube to make sure that she gets representation before she gets a little older, like my older two, and ask, my oldest son, is my sister going to be dark, So it really gets into our psyche. So I think the media portrays, white Americans as the superior race. It's the measuring stick. From my own personal experience, again, growing up in foster care, not being able to read people correctly can be very dangerous. And so I had to very early on lose some of the lenses of color, if that makes sense. And I had to really tune into who people actually are. So when it comes to my personal experience, I've had white people run the range just like I've had black people run the range. I've had white people give me opportunities that otherwise wouldn't have been afforded to me. And then I've had people take away opportunities because of who I was. And so it's a range. In Georgia, in South Georgia, being called a boy. So there were things that were ingrained about don't trust white folks and different things. But luckily, I've had the experience to just deal with all individuals. So it runs the gamut.
This group, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, South Americans, and like I said, in the interest of time, your thoughts in regards to media portrayal?
Again, I'm going to speak from my perspective, just going back to Cubans, Puerto Rican, South America. Cubans here living in Florida, the portrayal is Republican and, kind of a rift between Cubans and Puerto Ricans. This is what we see, right? I don't have a lot of personal experience with anyone who's Cuban, so it's hard for me to give a personal perspective. Puerto Ricans, my oldest two kids actually have Puerto Rican, so I spent about 10 years of my life really immersed in that culture. I think media portrayal, and I think Sarah mentioned this, not even having voting rights, says how we feel as America about Puerto Ricans. And I know Puerto Ricans, from my personal perspective, run a gamut as well. I have experienced racism in my ex-wife's Puerto Rican family, having certain expectations. And I think it goes to what Jacob was saying, this kind of colorism thing. And so from a personal experience, I've had great experience, but I've also experienced racism from Puerto Ricans.
Being a Black man, what is your thoughts on media? Is they're accurate in their portrayal of Black?
Again, I'm kind of, this one hits home because it depends on what people want, right? Well, everything that's going on right now, if you look at Colin Kaepernick, first he was the devil, right? He was everything you don't want to be. And then when it became pretty trendy to be about social justice, and then he's everything you want to be. And so sometimes I feel like, depending on what the message is, we're exploited. I think from a personal opinion, I love being a Black man, but it can be stressful and traumatizing on a daily basis, all the way down to hearing things like, you're an amazing father, as if it's something, and the tone is as if it's a unicorn, and trying to get people to understand we're not unicorns. This is every day. We're raising kids. And so you don't get that portrayal through the media. And so I think that skews people's thoughts and ideas about us.
That's what Sarah mentioned, that you don't see the positive side of what some of these other races, Black, Hispanic, or what have you, you're doing. The media likes to portray all the negative. And then real quickly, Derek, we finish up with you. Asians, what was the portrayal? Your thoughts in regards to that media?
I think for me, I was able to live in Hawaii for 2 years, and that was all of my experience with a wealth of Asian individuals from all over. For me, and the media portrayal is obviously the helicopter mom, the smartest kid in the room type deal. But from a personal perspective, I think the one thing that I've realized is a very close-knit, family-oriented, kind of old traditions, and I've grown to very much respect, a lot of Asian communities, especially working in healthcare. You won't find a lot of Asian elderly people in nursing homes. And, it's just it's very family-oriented and traditional is what I've experienced personally. And I think last from, Muslim and Jewish individuals, I mean, obviously, again, we kind of use them when we need to. It's been funny to me how we've had so much domestic terrorism going on, and I haven't heard the word Muslim through it all. But if it were, kind of anyone who was Black or brown, that'd be running all through the media. So, growing up and graduating in 2000 around 9/11, there was a time where it got in my psyche getting on an airplane, and I had to get over that because of the media just pumping that in my head. So on the personal level, I've found that these individuals seem to be very in tune with service to others, humanity, peace, just from the individuals I've encountered.